Welcome to what has got to be the windiest hillside in southern Spain and, more importantly, Jeep's first ever all-electric vehicle. It's going to have a petrol engine in the fullness of time, but for now, at launch, it's an electric car only. It's called the Avenger. It's priced from around £35,000. It's got a 249-mile range, fast charging, loads of off-road tech, and to my eyes at least, I think it looks fantastic. And I say that because Jeeps for me have got to look characterful and distinctive and fun. And I think this does that. It's got that squared off front and rear end, and it's also got a really nice profile and stance thanks to those bulging wheel arches that you can see. And the black plastic inserts around the bumper and the side sills, it's integrated really nicely into the design. So they're there for functional purposes if you bump it when you're off-roading or in traffic, but it actually looks good as well. It doesn't look cheap or an afterthought. It's a similar kind of design to the Citroen Cactus. And while I'm at the front end, take a look at this. I reckon that this vertical grille design here with the slats going down and also the rectangular headlamp profiles, that reminds me of an 80s Cherokee, which I think was one of the best looking Jeeps ever. Of course, you've got slats on most Jeeps that go like this, and these are a bit wider and it's not a proper radiator grille, but still, the whole design, it just works.
For those with a keen eye, there's plenty of smaller design touches too. The Jeep lights and grille logo appears throughout, while the windscreen has a stars graphic and a silhouette of a boy with a telescope and a person lying down, apparently depicting the designer of the car and his son. Look even closer, and on the inserts for the roof rails you'll see a tiny plastic ladybird with 7 spots, which is the same amount of grille slats as you'll find on the famous Jeep logo. Why are any of these things here? Well, who knows, but it's a nice touch regardless.
Now all of that is great, lovely attention to detail, but there's something about this car that I feel like I should tell you quite early on in the review because it's not very Jeep. Now if you mention the name Jeep to anyone, they'll think off-roaders. The name can be traced back to World War II reconnaissance vehicles. But this, the Avenger, it hasn't got four-wheel drive. It's front-wheel drive only. I mean, there is a four-wheel drive version coming, but it's not available now, and that's no good.
Jeep has, however, included a few electronic off-road aids on the Avenger to make sure it's not embarrassed when the going gets tough. Hill descent control is fitted as standard, as is the select terrain drive modes, including specific presets for mud, snow and sand.
It's not all about clever tech though, because Jeep has also adapted this car's platform so that the front and rear overhangs are as short as possible. And that means that you've got an approach angle of 20 degrees, a departure angle of 32 degrees, ground clearance of 200 millimeters, and a maximum wading depth of 230 millimeters. They've also done things like make sure that the bottom of the car is as flat as possible, and that helps protect the key components when you're off-roading, and it also helps with aerodynamics, which is never a bad thing. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't tested this car on a hardcore or even semi-hardcore off-road course because Jeep hasn't let us, and I can kind of understand that, but for what it's intended to do, which is a heavily rutted track going up to a house in the countryside, or perhaps snow conditions, or sand perhaps, it does the job really well, and it does offer an extra level of ability that you simply won't get with other cars in this sector that are not aimed at off-roading. The one thing I would say is that the increased approach and departure angles are great. You can definitely use that, but if it's, for example, a muddy field, then I'm not sure how much difference the drive modes are going to make. I reckon you could do most things in normal drive mode. And let's not forget that a lot of off-roading, especially in a muddy field, is going to be down to the tyres on this car. So if you put regular road tyres on this, and then you put off-roading or semi-off-roading tyres on an Alfa Romeo Tonale, and then you go to a muddy field, the Tonale would be the better off-roader. So it's got its limitations, so you've got to bear that in mind.
The Avenger maintaining some of its off-roading ability is crucial to the car's character, but as we know from big selling rivals, small SUVs are usually bought on the basis of their on-road performance and their cabins.
Climb into the Avenger and the rugged but fun theme continues in here, and it's largely because of this big body-coloured slab of trim that goes the full width of the dashboard. It's definitely needed because otherwise it's a little bit dark and grey and black, but this big bit of yellow, it looks fantastic. Obviously you need to get an actual bright colour on the outside so that it looks bright in here, because it wouldn't work as well if it was grey or black, but in yellow, yes, I really like it. And it's punctuated by ambient lighting around the outside there, which you can get in 8 different shades, so I'm a big fan of that. Trim levels, you've got 3 to choose from. There's longitude, altitude and summit, and all of them come with a 10.25-inch touchscreen infotainment system and a 7-inch digital dashboard display, unless you go for the top 2 trim levels, and then that digital dash increases in size to 10.25 inches, so the same as the infotainment screen. I'm actually pretty impressed with the infotainment system. It's probably not the best on the market quite, but it's nice and responsive. The menus are clear, the graphics look good, it's got built-in sat-nav and Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and also the digital dash is nice and high def, and you can customize it, so there's lots of different icons and information that you can see, and overall it works well and it fits in nicely with the car, so again, thumbs up with that. What else am I a fan of? Oh yeah, the steering wheel. It's made of a material called urethane, and it's very, very smooth and quite satisfying to hold, so I like that. And actually, the driving position as a whole, you are in a Jeep. You can tell that it's something which is a bit different to, say, a Super Mini because of how you're sat quite high, but it doesn't feel too wide. It's not a big thing to pilot down a narrow road. Also, it's got proper physical buttons for the climate control and the volume, which is fantastic. Some Stellantis products don't, and it's a big pain in the arse, but this really easy to use, and crucially, if you're going to do some rugged off-roading, which you might because it's a Jeep, then you can press all of these buttons with gloves on. And another thing which is very practical and definitely not boring is the storage space in here. Jeep claims that there's 34 litres of space in the interior, and that's a little bit hard to get your head around, but I mean, there's a nicely sized door pocket down here. There's a space just above those buttons where you can put all sorts of odds and ends. You've got the glove box. This bit, it folds back quite neatly like so, and there's your wireless charging pad on higher spec models, and also a really big bit that goes in there. As you can see, that just completely gets swallowed, and you can put that in there as well, and you can still close it up. And then move the armrest back, and there's 2 places. There's one for your bottles, and there's one for your other bits and bobs like your passport and your wallet. It's just filled with space in here.
It's easy to forget that the Avenger isn't a big car, but even so, there's still enough space in the back for a couple of tall adults. The boot, meanwhile, is available with an electronic tailgate, and luggage capacity is rated at 380 litres, helped by the fact that the batteries are stored further forward in the car. There's also a false floor for storing valuables, or the charging cable, and the boot lip is nice and flush, making it easier to load those bulky items.
Now this might come as a surprise, but one of my favourite bits about the Avenger and how it drives is that it doesn't feel too quick, and it's not too quick. It does 0 to 62 miles an hour in about 9.5 seconds. It's got 156 brake horsepower, 93 mile an hour top speed, and that's just right. Ever since electric cars have started coming out thick and fast, they've all had loads of power, and in some cases it's great. But when it comes to a little compact SUV like this that's supposed to be affordable and easy to drive, you don't need it to be ballistic and warp speed. It just needs to be brisk, which is exactly what it is. You put your foot down, you go, it keeps up with traffic. It's more than enough, but it's not excessive, and that's important. What I'm more interested in is the range. So it's got a 51 kilowatt hour usable battery, and that means that you've got a 249 mile WLTP range, which is pretty good. Jeep say that if you do lots of urban miles, that'll easily get to above 300 miles. And I believe them actually, because the range readout, we've done about 40 kilometers on this trip so far, has dropped by, what, 39, 40 kilometers? So it's pretty much bang on, which is what you want when you've got to plan your electric car journeys and not run out of juice at the critical moment. This is accurate and you can rely on it. Charging speeds, well, there's a 100 kilowatt DC charging capability, which means that you get 20 to 80% charge in around 24 minutes, which is good. Then the AC charging is 11 kilowatt only, and that means that you've got 0 to 100% of charge in 5.5 hours. I do like how this car handles. It feels agile, it's got a nice front end, there's lots of grip, it's got a really good turning circle, weighs about 1,500 kilograms, which, yeah, sounds heavy, but for an electric car actually isn't too bad. But the main issue is the steering. Like the Tonale that this car shares a platform with, it's over assisted. It does weight up a bit in sport mode, but in normal mode it's too light, and also there's no feel. So although, as I said, it's got good front end grip, you really can't feel it. So you end up sort of sawing your way into corners just to get a sensation of what the front tires are doing. Which is a shame, because actually I think it could be quite good fun. You've got the instant torque, as I said, it's not too quick, so you're not driving along and instantly braking the speed limit, and it resists roll well too. But yeah, I don't really know what the front wheels are doing. In fact, my ears are telling me more about the front wheels through what the tires are doing than my hands, which is a strange sensation.
Despite not having adaptive suspension, the Jeep manages to stay flat and agile in the corners, as well as being comfortable on the move. The ride is supple and it's quiet at motorway speeds with only a small amount of wind noise. This is a surprisingly relaxing car to drive around in.
I do like the way that the Avenger drives, minus the lack of steering feel. It's very accomplished, it's comfortable, it's quick enough, smooth, all of the things that you want. I think the one little bit that maybe lets it down is that it doesn't have the character in how it drives as the rest of the car does. Because you look at this thing and you think, oh wow, it looks fun, it looks cool. Is it going to drive like that? No. But then it is an EV, and as we know, getting character and making a car, an EV, feel unique when it hasn't got an engine, that's a really hard thing to do. So I don't think we can be too hard on Jeep for that. But just bear in mind that if you think that this is going to drive completely differently from any other EV rival in this sort of sector, then yeah, it's not. It's good to drive, but it's not unique.
I've spent 2 days driving the Avenger around southern Spain, and I honestly think that they've pretty much nailed it. Lifeless steering aside, it's hard to fault. And while it doesn't exactly feel much like a Jeep to drive, that could be seen as a good thing when it comes to the type of use that most customers will want it for. It's the Jeep badge and looks, but without the usual on-road compromises. And if that doesn't act as the brand's ticket to mass market success in Europe, then I really don't know what will.